When you look at images from the war in Vietnam, you notice a lot of things. You notice young men, extremely young men in some cases, looking like warriors. You notice jungles and rice paddies, and helicopters and M16s and jeeps. You notice nurses and USO shows and barbed wire and sandbags. But there are things in many, if not most of those images that you might not notice. You might not notice, for instance, the infrastructure of our armed forces, the roads, the observation towers, the Quonset huts. You might not notice the bridges, the helipads, the water tanks. All of these things were essential to fighting at scale in Vietnam, and more often than not, they were put there by men with tools in one hand and weapons in the other. These are the Seabees of the U.S. Navy. The name Seabees is taken from the initials CB, which stands for Construction Battalion. 10,000 Seabees were with the Marines who went across the beach at Chu Lai in May of 1965, and during the peak of the Vietnam conflict, there were 25,000 of them in 22 battalions, 2 regiments, 2 maintenance units, and scores of civic action teams. Trained for combat as well as construction, Seabees frequently found themselves in the thick of the fighting, and they often distinguished themselves with their heroism. There are 85 Seabees memorialized on the wall, including 1 Medal of Honor recipient. In this episode, we bring you conversations with 2 Seabees who served in Vietnam, including one who pioneered the underwater construction techniques still in use by Seabees today. Stick around. From the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, founders of The Wall, this is Echoes of the Vietnam War. I'm your host, Michael Crone, bringing you stories of service, sacrifice, and healing from people who still feel the impact of that conflict more than 50 years later. Episode 69, We Build, We Fight. Right after this. Our little podcast has crossed a significant threshold in its journey of growth. It has now been listened to more than 250,000 times. To celebrate and commemorate this milestone, we created a special limited edition collectible coin. It's a bronze challenge coin with the Echoes of the Vietnam War logo in color on one side and the VVMF logo blind embossed on the other. The Echoes of the Vietnam War collectible coin is available as a thank you for your gift of $100 or more, which you can make by going to vvmf.org/echoes and scrolling down to the bottom of the page where it says Support Echoes. Remember, this is a limited edition coin. We really didn't make very many of them, so get yours today before they're all gone. And thanks for helping us get from 0 to 250,000 and beyond.
Hello, I'm Gary Sinise. Nearly 3 million Americans served in Vietnam, and more than 58,000 have their names inscribed on the wall. Those that pay the ultimate price in service to America. Some might ask why the Vietnam War still matters. It matters because more than 58,000 lives were cut short and their families forever changed. It matters because we should never forget how Vietnam veterans were treated when they came home. A lesson learned so that our current generation of veterans are treated with respect. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, the organization that built the wall, works to ensure that future generations will understand the war's impact. I'm asking you to help keep the promise the wall was built on. Never forget. Visit vvmf.org to find out how you can get involved.
Our first guest described the Seabees to me this way. He said, "A Seabee is a soldier in a sailor's uniform with Marine Corps training doing civilians' work at government wages."
I was with the Navy Seabees in Vietnam, the Naval Mobile Construction Battalion 11, and I was there in 3 different tours with the battalion.
That's Bruce Geibel. He retired from the Navy as a captain in 1991 after 29 years of service. He joined me by phone from his home in Canton, Georgia.
Started out with them in training in Fort Miami, California. And on the 26th of June, 1966, I departed Port Miami for Vietnam. The battalion was already overseas in Da Nang, East Vietnam, in 1966. We came back home from that deployment in October, November timeframe of that year. I deployed a second tour in 1967 as officer in charge of CB Team 1109, part of Naval Mobile Construction Battalion 11, and we were stationed in Ching Kam, Thailand, where I was working with a 13-man CB team, working with the Thai Border Patrol Police. I returned from that tour in November of that year, having deployed over there to Thailand in April of that year. I went back to Vietnam with the battalion a third time in Quang Tri, Vietnam, and that was I was there from April to September of 1966. Left Vietnam. I was offered a full Navy, be U.S. Navy rather than reserve at that time, and that began the rest of my active duty career. I retired as a captain in September 1991. Seabees, or the Naval Construction Force, Seabees comes from the initials Construction Battalion, CV. A guy turned that into a C like SCA, being at sea, and bees, because we're always kind of like busy as bees. So that's where the acronym Seabees came from. And a CB does all kind of construction. We do it for the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Marines, sometimes the Coast Guard. We do it overseas. During World War II, the Seabees did work for the Marines, primarily in the South Pacific on islands out there. They also did work with other armed forces, including the U.S. Army on D-Day and liberation of several of the countries over there, and marching across the Rhine River. We set up pontoon bridges across the Rhine River there so the Army folks could take their tanks across into Germany from Luxembourg. So that's a little bit about what the Seabees are.
Yeah, building and fighting.
Construimus batuimus. We build, we fight. Going back to World War II, there were a bunch of civilians doing construction work all over the South Pacific at all the islands out there, from Guam to Philippines, Wake, those islands out there. But civilians were unarmed, and they didn't have any way to protect themselves. When the Japanese came ashore, they took them as prisoners of war. Many of them they executed or shot or were killed when they invaded the islands out there. And so the U.S. Navy began to recognize the need for armed construction people out there to continue to do work. Seabees are construction personnel. They come from the Navy's Group 8 ratings, and the ratings include steel workers, builders, equipment operators, construction mechanics, construction electricians, engineering aides, and utilities men. So they come from all the different types of building trades.
Mm-hmm. And that motto, "We build, we fight," is represented by the mascot of the Seabees. Can you describe that?
Yeah, the CB mascot is kind of built like a bee. You have the arm appendages there. One holds a hammer. The other one holds a Tommy gun at the front, and they have a CB rate on the side to show they're part of a military organization. But the hammer basically implying we build, the Tommy gun at the front indicating we fight. So not only do we build things, but we're there capable of defending the sites that we build.
Yeah. So let's break that down a little bit. Let's start with building. Can you give some examples of the kinds of things that Seabees would have been building in Vietnam?
Seabees do vertical work, which is building buildings and facilities that go in the air, and they do horizontal work, and that will be road work along the plane of the ground there. So we do that type of thing. But the things we would build would include things like roads and bridges, piers, wharves, hospitals. We would do chapels for religious things. We build barracks to be able to house the military troops. We build dining halls and galleys to feed them. We build storage facilities and warehouses to house the materials, the construction materials, and even the foods that we eat in warehouses. We do simple things like build a movie screen so you can show a movie, or build an amphitheater so they can have an outdoor movie theater amphitheater there with maybe a USO show come in to do a show on the stage here. We can do observation towers where they can put platforms up in the air, steel or wood up maybe 20 foot in the air so that they can look out fields of fire and be able to see any oncoming enemy forces. We also build ammunition supply points where we can bury our ammunition between bunkers and down in holes there to protect it from getting hit. They build helicopter pads. A lot of the work we did out there, we had to go to remote sites, and the only way to get out to some of these where the Army and the Marines were was to go out by helicopter. So we built helicopter pads and protect it so they could come in, pick up supplies, and Seabees to take them out to these work sites to do the construction out there. We built petroleum, oil, and lubrication tanks, great big tanks, 10,000 barrel tanks. We could build showers and bathroom facilities, all types of related infrastructure. And besides that, we worked with the local villagers in many, many villages, and we did civic action work for them. We could help them hand dig wells. We could help them plow things up to be able to make a garden. We could help them build a dispensary to be able to take care of their sick and ill. And we could help them build a schoolhouse so they could train their kids. We could help them build roads out to the village so the villagers could take their wares, maybe vegetables they wanted to sell or things they made out to the local village and be able to sell it to make money to buy things there to take back to the village. So we did all kinds of things like that for both the villagers and military units we supported.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, basically anything required for victory that wasn't already there, the Seabees built.
Absolutely. And if things were there, maybe damaged or destroyed or built up, we would help them rebuild those facilities and infrastructure so they could work again.
Yeah. So let's talk about the fighting side. My understanding is that, Seabees saw a lot of action, but most of that probably would have been defending the areas where they were trying to work if that area was under attack. Is that fair to say?
That is correct, but it's all about teamwork, being able to work together, being able to do construction, have your weapons nearby, so if you came under attack, you could get in a foxhole and be prepared to defend that position. It was about teamwork. It wasn't about one person doing one thing. It was about 6 people working together to have overwhelming construction support as well as overwhelming defense against people who may be attacking you there. Teamwork.
Bruce, when you visit the wall, are there any particular names that you look for?
One was a Seabee that worked on my Seabee team, Charles Jones. He was on my Seabee team in Thailand. He went back to join our battalion, and then later on he came back with another battalion, Naval Mobile Construction Battalion 5 on a follow-on tour. Not unlikely for Seabees to go back to Vietnam many, many times. He stepped on a mine, was injured with that battalion in I think it was 1969. He was injured, and 5 days later he died from his wounds there, and his name is on the wall.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about regarding the Seabees or your experience in Vietnam that you think is important for our listeners to understand?
I think one thing I'd like to call everybody's attention, and anybody in the Seabees now would know the name Marvin Shields. He was a CB on CB Team 1104 that was deployed to Vietnam out of our battalion, NFCB 11, back in 1965. And he was a hero in that battalion. He was the first and only Medal of Honor winner. Although he got it posthumously, he won the Medal of Honor for his heroic actions there with an Army Green Beret first lieutenant who was acting in charge of a Green Beret team that the CB Team 1104 was working with. And what they did was just amazing. And the lieutenant with the Green Berets also won the Medal of Honor, but he got his from a president. The wife got Marvin Shields posthumously there from the president in Washington, D.C. back in 1966.
After a short break, I'll talk with Chuck Waddell, who joined the Navy at 16, became the first enlisted man assigned to a diving billet in the Seabees, pioneered underwater construction in the Navy, and went on to write a memoir called Farm Boy Can't Swim. Stick around. The Registry is an online community created by VVMF that connects veterans of the Vietnam War era with each other. By signing up for the Registry, you can upload and share stories and images, connect with others who served during the Vietnam era, and connect your service with people you knew whose names are now on the wall. Join the community and preserve your legacy or a family member's by signing up today at vvmf.org/registry. Do you have loved ones who survived the Vietnam War but died after returning home? Did you know you can honor them at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C.? We're accepting applications for the 2024 In Memory Honor Roll through March 29. We also have an In Memory Facebook group with more than 20,000 members, so be sure to join that if you want to feel part of a community of people who've experienced a loss similar to yours. You'll find the In Memory Honor Roll application and a link to the Facebook group by going to vvmf.org and clicking on In Memory. And now back to the episode.
No, my mother passed away when I was 14 years old, and I had a father never around, and I had a brother that was in the Navy, and a nephew that had joined the Navy, and then I decided it was time for me to go do something, so I joined the United States Navy when I was 16 years old.
That's Chuck Waddell, a former Seabee and author of the book Farm Boy Can't Swim. He joined me via Zoom from his home in southern Utah.
And people ask me how I did that being 16. You have to have your parents sign for you. And I told my Navy recruiter, mom's passed away and dad's an alcoholic. You might go up north of Spokane and find him and he can sign the papers. And of course, the Navy recruiter never did find my dad. He signed the papers and I went in the Navy. I had a good Navy recruiter.
At 16?
At 16.
So you hadn't even finished high school yet?
No, sir. I dropped out and I worked on different farms for a couple of years until I turned 16. And that's when I joined the Navy, and it was the best decision I ever made in my life was to join the Navy and make a career of it. And when I went into the recruiter, I said, sign me up for 20 years. And he said, I can't do it. But I was ready to go for 20 years. And it was the best, like I say, the best decision I ever made. And I got to travel the world.
Now, when you go into the Navy at 16 years old, right? Physically, are you mature like the other boys in boot camp, or?
Well, I come from the farm community, a little town called Spangle, Washington, of 242 people, And we worked on the farms and ranches and stuff like that. So I feel that we're more advanced than what the city boys are, because we're out in the fields working and milking cows and getting educated. And so consequently, at the age of 16, I weighed 150 pounds. I was a pretty good sized boy. And hay and bucking bales and working like a man. We were pretty fit fellows at that age.
Okay. Okay. So what year was this that you went into the Navy?
I went in the Navy in June of 1960, May of 1960.
May of 1960. And where'd they send you for boot camp?
I went to boot camp in San Diego. And then from San Diego, went to Fort Hueneme. They was going to make a gunner's mate out of me. And I said, no, I'm going to be a Seabee, because that's all I ever do is construction and equipment and stuff like that. And I'd been to trade school in Spokane for welding and everything. So they finally were convinced that I'd be a better Seabee. So from boot camp, I went to Fort Hueneme, and then I went back down to Camp Pendleton and went through 3 weeks of Marine Corps Basic. Mm-hmm. And then from there, we went to Guam for 9 months.
You said you wanted to be a Seabee. So even at the age of 16, you knew what a Seabee was?
Yes, sir, I did. I had a nephew that had joined the Seabees ahead of me, and he's a year older than I am. And he went in and ended up on the East Coast and did his 4 years in one station, and that was it. And of course, I went in the Navy at 16, just a short time after him. And then my other nephew, which is a year younger than I am, he come in and he was also a Seabee. So it was right there together in the family. We're all Seabees.
Yeah. So when you say construction battalion, can you just give a few examples of the kinds of work that Seabees would do?
When I was in Guam, for instance, I was with MCB 11. That's Mobile Construction Battalion 11. And over there, we were building concrete houses there on Guam, and a swimming pool and all. And I was first assigned to the steel yard where I was bending rebar for these concrete houses that we was doing. And I was placing the rebar in those houses all the time I was in Vietnam or in Guam.
Mm-hmm. So you said it was 1960 and you were there for 9 months.
Yes, sir. And then from there, I come back to the States. I was in the States for 30 days, and I went to Yokosuka, Japan with when I first was there was Public Works, and then they transferred me to ACB-1, which is amphibious construction battalions. And of course, they do amphibious working on piers and pontoons and all this stuff with the amphibs. And there I was with the steel shop building pontoons and all. And I was there for almost 3 years.
Yeah. So how do you get from Japan to Vietnam, and when?
In September of '66, I come back from Japan. But I did a tour in Fort Hueneme at the military training facilities, tactics. And I went to NCO school in Camp Pendleton, and I was the only Navy personnel and 80 Marines in that class. And I was really harassed by the Marines, but I made it through it. And then I did my tour at NCO school, and then of course at CB Center, Fort Hueneme, and military training instructor. And then in April of that next year, MCB 10 come back from July, and I joined MCB 10 then in 1966 and went through diving school that year. And then I went to Vietnam, Da Nang, Vietnam, and Da Nang, I was in charge of building strand steel buildings throughout the Da Nang area, and also being the diver over there with a crew of divers. Then all the diving was my responsibility. One of the interesting dives I did over there in Vietnam was we had a 10,000 gallon water tank up on the hill, and the flapper valve went bad. So the medical officer made me take a shower. They rubbed me down with alcohol. I jumped into the fresh water tank, handed me my diving gear. I went down and worked on the flapper valve. I come back up and went back down to the base afterwards. I had convinced everybody that I urinated in water, but that was always a good joke. But that was a fun dive that day. But I also did some salvage work of cutting the pontoons up. The Marine Corps had swamped a river assembly boat. I had to go out on Benoit River and recover that boat for them. And kind of a story there. When we pulled into the camp there, I hate to say that, but they greeted us in a fancy way with two Viet Cong heads jammed on French boats out there. And we got in there and started diving, and we got the first half of the boat out, and it was getting late at night, and it was raining, and the rudder was rising. And I told the lieutenant, I said, let's cancel this until tomorrow morning. And of course, that night the sergeant said, well, come on, go on patrol with us tonight, Chuck. And I said, no, that foxhole, my foxhole, that's where I'm staying. But they had sent an ensign with me from the battalion, and he told the lieutenant, he said, we can't be out of the camp after 1800. You'd have to get a helicopter and fly us back to camp. The lieutenant told our little ensign, he said, I can't get a helicopter in here to fly my wounded out. He said, let alone fly your dumb butt out of here. So we had to spend the night out there in the woods with the Marines that night. And of course, the next day we got the rest of that boat up for them and stuff like that. But I dove every Sunday. I got a half a day off every Sunday. And I would go over to a place called Monkey Mountain, which later became a big resort area for everybody for R&R. But there was a beautiful place to dive over there. And I would dive for lobster, and I'd bring the lobster back to the cooks first. They got the first lobsters because that got me a block of ice every day, so I have ice water over there.
How long were you in Vietnam?
I spent 9 months over there, and just outside of Da Nang at the Air Force Base on Hill 327. And I helped build the exchange and the big amphitheater there. And of course, I built strand steel bays. And a sad story here, I was building a strand steel at Charlie Med. That was they were just up the road from us. And that's where they brought the wounded in and did surgeries and stuff like that. One day I went up to work on the building, and the stench and everything is so bad because they'd bring the bodies in, and the helicopters wouldn't even land. They'd just drop them off, and of course the grave and registration was right there. And I had a second-class petty officer on my crew that wanted to be a mortician. And every time I turned around, Pittman was over there working with the morticians, helping them. But burning the clothes and burning the bodies and seeing all of it, it wasn't a pleasant thing to be around. And like I say, one day we went up there and it was really, really, very unbearable. And I took the crew and we went back home, and the company commander said, what are you doing here? And I says, we can't work up there today. And they said, oh, yeah, we will. I said, well, you get in the Jeep, we're going to go for a ride. And I went up there. He said, no, you guys got the day off. So, I mean, that stench and everything, you'll never get that out of your nose. Yeah, I mean, it's horrible. But there was other things other than that were pretty bad over there that you get involved in.
Now, you'd been in Guam, you'd been in Japan, so you're no stranger to Asia. But was there anything about Vietnam that stuck with you? First impressions?
First impression, we was flying in C-130s, and you fly in, and all of a sudden you drop those nose and you're down on the runway. And of course, there's a few snipers there and all too, but you land on that runway, bang, and you're there. And then driving up to our camp and all, the first night I was out on the rock crusher, hard facing the jaws. And I am a perfect target because I got a blue light in my hand. And we got a sniper up on the hill that just welcomed me to Vietnam. So being a young 17, I was 18 years old, 19 years old, I'll get it somewhere there. Get hit there and have rounds coming at you the first night is a rude awakening. I mean, from then on, you're scared. I'm not kidding you. That first night was pretty rough.
Yeah. Yeah, it must be. I mean, it must be unusual for somebody 19, 20 years old to be an NCO, with that kind of responsibility.
I can brag a little bit here. Even in boot camp, I was the assistant acting CPO of the company. From there, when I got to Guam, I was in charge of the shipfitters yard, or the steelworkers yard. I've always been in command duty from the time I joined boot camp. It was kind of funny. I was what they call Woodman of the World. It was a group, and it was teaching us marching and fly fishing and hunting and stuff like that. And when in boot camp, they said, anybody got any experience in marching? And I said, yes, I do. And that's how I ended up being the acting chief petty officer of the company. And like I say, I've always been in command ever since I joined the service. I've been very fortunate, I guess. So being commander of the steel yard and then being in charge of the divers and in charge of my own squad doing the construction work and everything else. And then when I come in the diving world, I was in charge of the diver lock. So it's always been command duty.
Mm. Now, you mentioned earlier that underwater construction is not such an unusual thing now. Was it unusual then for you to have the two skill sets?
Yes, it was. I'm the very first enlisted man that was assigned to a diving billet in the Seabees.
That was assigned to a what?
To a diving billet. I was the first assigned to a diving billet. Now, in World War II and all that, there were Seabee divers working in Hawaii and stuff like with hard hat diving and stuff like that, but they were never assigned as a diver billet. Mm. Okay.
So you're the first official diver in the Seabees.
In the Seabees, which was in April of 1970. 1967, April of 1967, when I joined the NCEL. Now, when I come back from Vietnam, what happened was I always knew that there was going to be something going on under construction. So I would sneak off and go over to Naval Civil Engineering Lab at Fort Hueneme and got to know the civilians over there, who John Cork was in charge of the GS-14. And I would, for 3 months there, I would sneak off. And I kind of got in trouble a few times from the chief about being not where I was supposed to be. But I got to know those people. We talk about diving and what the responsibility was and stuff like that. I got a set of orders to Adak, Alaska, diving duty. I went over to John and I said, John, I got orders. I'll be leaving in 2 weeks, going to Adak, Alaska. And John says, no, you're not going to Adak, Alaska. You're coming here. And I said, John, I don't think you got that much pull. And he says, watch. And the phone started going and the letters started going. And 2 weeks later, I had a set of orders to NCEL diving duty. And so that started my career in a really big way in the diving. I ended up going to first class schools, saturation schools, salvage schools, and all, and running the diving locker there at Fort Hueneme.
No, I want to come back to that because I want to hear more about those schools. But before we leave Vietnam, you said you were there for 9 months. Did you spend the entire 9 months in and around Da Nang?
In and around Da Nang, and Benoit River was my furthest expedition out. Helping the Marines get that boat, but my time was all around Da Nang, Red Beach, out at Monkey Mountain, and all that area there. I built a total of 5 strand buildings over there. And interesting there is, we didn't have enough concrete finishers to finish concrete and everything else to do these steel buildings. So I convinced the company commander to let me train my boys on setting the forms and finishing concrete and all. And I had a little experience because my dad did a lot of concrete work and all. And so consequently, they said, go ahead. So it ended up from then on, I had my own concrete finishers and we'd pour our own concrete, standard building and everything else ourselves. And I was working on one for the 3rd Marine Corps it was a financial facility, had a big safe going in and stuff like that. It was kind of raining one morning, it was pouring concrete, and one of the transmitters were sliding in the ditch. And I didn't want to lose that cement truck, so we only had 5 of them. We couldn't afford to lose another truck. So 3rd Marines were up on the hill from us where we was working. And I went up over the hill and I went into their pool of dozers and I jumped on a dozer with a P25 on the back of it. And I went out to the main gate with it. I said, hey, Sergeant Peters said I could use this. We got a problem over the hill there. The guard let me out with that dozer. I went down and hooked onto that transit mix and keep it from tipping over. And I'm dumping the concrete out of it because I wanted to save the truck. And I sent word back to the company commander, who was Norman D. Chris, that I needed him and the wrecker out there because the ensign had shown up there in the Marines. It kind of convinced him that they could save that concrete. And I had to tell that ensign, you make a written direct order, otherwise I'm going to dump this concrete. And I dumped the concrete. And when Lieutenant got there, I told him, I said, that ensign said I had to save that concrete for the Marines. And I had a little spat with him. And the lieutenant went over and told that ensign, he said, you get out of here and don't come back. And backed me up on saving that cement truck. But I did a lot of grand larceny on the outside, but COMSHA on the inside. Being in Seabees, you have to learn how to COMSHA and get things done. So that was the biggest piece of equipment I ever stole.
When your time drew short, you were getting ready to leave Vietnam. Did that change do you feel like you were different in terms of your attitude or how you approached the job?
Well, here again, remember I got injured on the diving tunnel we was doing for the Air Force Base. My right arm was cut pretty bad, and I couldn't use it at all. And I was running around there the last about 2 months, not knowing what I was going to do or anything else. They wanted to send me to. I said, no, I'm going to stay here because we had a good medical facility. And the guys down at the shop made me a sling for my wrist and everything else. And I finally went into the executive officer and I said, Commander Weir, I said, why don't you let me take over special services? And there gives me something to do. I can pass out equipment on Sundays or do stuff. So we went down and there was an E7 chief petty officer who had special services, and he was invited to go back to the Delta Company, and I took over special services. So it was a pretty easy time for me in Vietnam. There was a lot of things I didn't like that went on over there, stealing from us and stuff like that. But I was different in the aspect is it made you grow up. You knew what war was about. You've seen a lot of death and a lot of destruction. So yeah, it changed your life. It makes you think. Back. I lost too many friends over there.
So what is saturation school? What does that mean?
Saturation is where you go down into a depth and you stay there for more than a period of time, where you don't have decompression. You can stay there for 2-3 days or a week, and you're saturated out. My longest dive was 300 feet for 9 days, from the time I entered the chamber until I got out when I went to school. I'm only one of 4 Seabees at the time that had ever went through saturation school. Okay? And I was at 300 feet, and we were guinea pigs doing mixed gas studies. And they put a foreign gas to me, and I passed out at 300 feet. And today it's top secret. They will never tell you what kind of gas they put on me, because we was testing to see if there was other gas we could use other than helium and oxygen. And I have no idea what the gas was, and I can never find out.
So I'm assuming that's where the name comes from. Saturation refers to the blood gases.
Right. See, when you go down and stay at a depth for a number of time, like the Sea Lab program, you crawl into what's called a PTS transfer capsule. You're lowered down to your depth. You work. You crawl back in the capsule. They bring you up. You lock back on the chambers, and you live in the chamber. And you stay saturated for duration, and then you start your decompression. And it depends on how deep you are, or how long it takes you to decompress and to get back up to surface.
What are some of the physical effects of being saturated?
We're finding out now that it affects your body in several different ways, especially joints has been a bad thing. I've had both of my knees replaced now and because of the diving. And I feel also that when I was a guinea pig with this gases and everything else, that's probably some of the reason why my lungs are the way they are now. I have COPD awful bad, and I think that a lot of that gas was part of that. The other thing is hearing. You're always punching your eardrums and from pressure. And so consequently, 90% of us all here end up with hearing aids before we get out of the diving because you're trying to equalize the pressure on it there. So there's lots of side effects that are coming up from, and we're finding out about saturation diving too, but we learn how to live with it too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you said once you were in the Navy, you made a career out of it. How long did you stay in?
I did over 12, almost 13 years in when I was injured on a dive in San Diego and was put out with 100% disability.
So 13 years total in the Navy?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. What'd you do after that? I mean, you got a unique skill set, right? I mean, not too many guys can do what you do.
You know, I got hundreds of stories about the diving and stuff that I've worked on with the diving that I did in the Navy, the Sea Lab program, all of this research and development work that I did at NCEL and then sitting under all construction teams and all that noise. So there's a lot to talk about in the diving world that things that I've developed back 50 years ago, they're still using today. And all, I went to all these schools and all this noise to become a master diver in the Navy. And unfortunately, I was in the E7 and I couldn't become a master diver, but I've been recommended for meritorious advancement way back when. So there's a lot of stories to talk about here before I talk about what I did after the service.
Okay.
I was at NCL there until I went to first class school in March of '68. I went to saturation school in May of '69. And then in '69, October '69, I took a crew of divers and a lieutenant back to Davisville, Rhode Island to set up a first underwater construction team called UTCT-1.
Chuck, let me ask you a question. While you're, 17, 18, 19 years old in the Navy and you're over in the Pacific and the South China Sea, do you have any idea what's going on with your siblings?
The first 5 years that I was in, they knew that I was in the Navy, but I had no contact with anybody for 5 years of my family. I had a younger sister, an older sister, and a brother still alive. And like I say, my dad died while I was in the service also. So I like I say, I just kind of left home because I was kind of drinking too much and running with the guys and all. And I didn't have a chance to have anything being my dad being an alcoholic, mother being passed away. And there was just nothing there for me. So the Navy became my family. And I went in with the attitude 20 years and I volunteered for a lot of things because that was my life. And I had the opportunity to see a lot. I've got Japan. I got down into Mindoro, Philippine Islands, and Okinawa, Midway, Wake, Guam. I got to see a lot and do a lot of things. A lot of these people never get to see that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. What did you ever reconnect with your siblings?
I did after it was I got home from Japan. And I went and seen my sister and I went back and seen my grandparents and all. And it wasn't until, after I got out of the Navy before my brother and I really got to do anything because I was working on a ranch and mom was in the hospital and I seen my brother drive by and he wouldn't even pick me up and take me up to see mom. And the gentleman that I was working for at the time had just bought a brand new 57 Chevy pickup. And I stole that pickup one Sunday and I drove it to Spokane. I'm only 14 years old. I got an agricultural permit. And 10 years later, Dutch said, Chuck, I need to talk to you about something. I said, what's that? He said, the day you stole my pickup. He knew it, but he knew where I went. He knew I went to see mom. Of course, that was the last time I'd seen my mother-in-law. But my brother and I, we wouldn't speak for years until after I got out of the service. And then we finally kind of buried the hatchet a little bit. And of course, he's 86 years old now, and I'm 80 years old. So we better bury it because time is going to run out here real quick. And then, of course, I got two sisters that we see one another once in a blue moon. They're up in Washington State, and I'm down here in beautiful Cedar City, Utah. Well, after being out of the service for 50 years, and a diver, I love the water. I kid you not. I love that ocean. Drop back a few years, as a kid, I was about 12 years old, we went salmon fishing at Westport, and I got so seasick out there, I told the captain, you call the Coast Guard, tell them I'm dying. So I never thought I'd ever be involved in the open again. But after I got and become a diver, I love diving. I love that ocean. I mean, that is nothing but beauty. And people never get to see what I got to see and do in the water. And consequently, I had to stay away from the divers. And I did for a number of years. And a few years ago, I thought, you know what? I need to go see what the divers are doing. So I went to Fort Wayne and I went to the diver locker that I built. And I walked in, there was nobody there. So I made myself to home. I just started walking through the diver locker and seeing what they'd changed and what they'd added and stuff like that. And at the time, I was dragging an oxygen bottle and I was in a walker. And I started to walk out, and this chief walked in the front door and he said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I'd like to talk to somebody that works here." He says, "I'm the master diver here." And he kind of stepped back and he looked at me and he says, "Is your name Waddell?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "We've been looking for you for a long time." He said, "Come with me." So
how did he wait? Why? What made him say that? What made him say, "Is your name Waddell"?
Well, because there was a lot of history. They didn't have any history about the diving. Now we're talking at that time, probably 40 years. Okay, that they didn't have anything. And they had a whole bunch of pictures and nobody knew what it was all about. So I sat there for a couple of hours going through pictures and showing him what it was. And he's writing down all the information on it and everything else. And he said, one of the questions, "You people had a pickup truck?" "Yeah, we did." And so I showed him a picture of it. I had it on my phone. And they just heard about it. They'd never seen it. And there was a lot of that kind of stuff that they didn't know. And he said, "We need to go over to Team 2, Underwater Construction Team 2 tomorrow morning." And I said, "Fine, we'll go over. I'd like to see the equipment they got." No. So we get over there and we start walking around with the commanding officer and looking at all this equipment and all this noise and everything else. We ended up in the classroom with 42 divers sitting there. And the commanding officer says a few words and he introduced me and I said, "Oh, I'm not prepared for this." 45 minutes later, and them guys still sitting on the edge of their chairs, I had a lot of fun talking history to these people. And they said, "Chuck, you need to write a book." And I said, "I'm an old 8th grade dropout." And I says, "I got my high school education after I got out of the service. I graduated from high school in 1979. And I told myself, I don't need to write a book. The guys at the diver locker got the paperwork that recommended me for the meritorious advancement to chief petty officer. And they took that and they run to Washington and they got it all approved and was signed by the senior chief petty officer of the United States Navy. And in Fort Wayne, California, they had me come back and I did a week's initiation because the Navy still initiates their chief petty officers, their E7s. So I went through a week's initiation and then we had the ceremony on the parade ground and it cost me $1,000 for a dress uniform and my khaki uniform. And when they piped me across there from my wife pinning me and my hat put on me and all this noise, about 500 people just erupted. And one of the happiest days of my life was getting that chief's hat put on me.
Chuck describes southern Utah as a veteran-friendly community. There you can find monuments, memorials, and exhibits honoring those who served in every war from World War I to Operation Iraqi Freedom. In 2017, Washington City, Utah hosted the Wall That Heals, and now a group of veterans is working to build a permanent replica of the wall in the area. It's going to take a lot of work to get that done, including fundraising, but the Seabees motto is "Can do, will do," and Chuck is among those driving the effort.
We're on Interstate 15, which goes north and south from border to border. So you got hundreds of people now who will have the opportunity to see the wall. They can't afford to go to Washington to see it, but traveling Interstate 15, they'll be able to stop and see this wall. And I still feel the hurt from Vietnam being called a baby killer and my house being stolen from me when I was in Vietnam. When I was in Vietnam in July, the real estate company that I bought my house from in Oxnard, California, they used a quitclaim deed and signed it and stole my house. And I come home from Vietnam on emergency leave. I lost my house. I lost all my equity. I never got my house back because I couldn't even get a lawyer.
How were they able to do that?
When I bought my house, I signed a quitclaim deed blank and didn't know it. And they used it in July. What really hung them was I was in Vietnam in July when they signed that. They took that signed document and filed it and took my house away from me. But I come home to get it back, and I couldn't get a lawyer to help me. And consequently, I lost that house. I lost all the equity. They moved my wife out of there, and she moved into an apartment house.
Your wife was living in the house at the time?
My wife was living in the house. They forced her out of the house, and she moved into a rented apartment. And I couldn't get anybody to help me. That's how bad it was back in them days. You can't realize.
You couldn't get anyone to help you. You couldn't get a lawyer to help you, you believe, because of your service in Vietnam?
That's in fact exactly right. You couldn't get anybody to help you. I went back to Vietnam. I was there for 7 days. I went back to Vietnam and lost my house. Okay? And that was one of the things that really hurt me more about it in Vietnam is you got spit on when you come in, you got tormented, and you lost your house, and nobody helps you. So I have a lot of hurt, but I want the veterans to be honored, and the only way you can honor these people is to get that wall built here.
Our thanks to Bruce Geibel and Chuck Waddell for sharing their stories with us. You can find Chuck's book, Farm Boy Can't Swim, at Amazon. In the meantime, I'm going to leave you with a song. Here's Judy Garland from May 1944, performing Can Do, Will Do, Song of the Seabees. We'll be back in 2 weeks with more stories of service, sacrifice, and healing. See you then.
That's where we came in. Mr. Brown and Mr. Jones, the Owens, the Coens, the Flynn. The Navy wanted more of Uncle Sammy's kin.